What's up, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Neo Vintage Podcast. I'm Jarrell, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope everyone's doing well out there.
And for you guys who have never seen the show before, we're just two guys that like to talk over the biggest stories in gaming, but we always like to start with what we've been playing. So for the last time this year, Steve, what you been playing?
Yeah, so, we've kind of wrapped up the year here. We've discussed everything we've been playing, and we're going to go through some of that stuff today. So,
Yep.
The only real new addition, beat my God of War, beat Sonic Frontiers. Right at the end of the year, two little games squeaked out. So one I gotta give it's hard to discuss this one. We were trying to discuss it obviously off the air or off recording just now. That's Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, the port and remaster of the 2008-9 PSP game, the prequel to Final Fantasy VII. So we've been playing that. I was still early on. I'm not dying to rush through it. I'm well aware of the story. So I am just kind of playing it casually to enjoy it. It's really nice. It's such a weird mixture at first. I wasn't even kind of feeling it day one just because you have some of these pre-rendered cutscenes now expanded onto a full screen that don't translate the best. Then you have other cutscenes that look really fantastic. And then you have other ones where it almost does look like they just threw a coat of paint on some of the models. I'm not sold on everybody's new voice. I'm assuming they did redo the redubbing, at least from what I'm understanding online, is because
Zach's definitely is.
Yeah, I know Zach's for sure.
Yeah.
It works, I guess, kind of mixed. I believe it's like the cast of everyone, like Turks and everyone like that, is the new cast from the remake trilogy that's coming out, and I guess they just wanted all like one canon. And obviously we'll be seeing Zack in flashbacks in the future Final Fantasy. So I'm guessing they just wanted all the voice to be the same. Not sold on all of them. Zack still, there's moments where he just seems sort of jarring. It's not delivered. It doesn't have that same sort of hit. But all in all, it is a great game. I'm just so glad the game is now future-proof and it's just in circulation now. You can play it on your modern consoles. You don't have to emulate it. You don't have to do the trick to get it on the Vita, and you don't need to have your little PSP UMD anymore. So, really fun, and it's just been so long. So it is really nice to experience it. The only other game I've played recently, and I very early on as well, came out this week. I'm maybe 3 or 4 hours in, and that's High on Life, the new game from Squanch Games. Yeah. I canceled my Game Pass, but my Game Pass is still active till the end of the month. So I was like, why not try out this? I enjoy the Squanch, which is the Rick and Morty crew. This is their video game sort of company that they work with. I don't know what the ownership is, but it's the Rick and Morty crew. And I thought I would like this game a whole lot more than I do. I do think there's the way I've explained it is there's always a reason why, and I've always said it just works better that Rick and Morty comes on weekly for 20-minute bursts. I think that's the best way the jokes are delivered when you're not hammered with the style for an hour and a half. Not that there's not funny moments in High on Life. There are some good moments. There are some times where I do laugh. But some of these jokes just are so cringy and just fall so flat. For anyone who had an issue with last year's Guardians of the Galaxy, the constant chitter chat, all that, you're gonna hate this because everything talks to you, from your HUD to the tutorial guide to your gun to your knife to your enemies, sometimes inanimate objects. So there is also I just call God voice. It's just a voice that speaks to you for no reason. It's just constant, and there's some settings to lower some of those, but it's still just constantly going, and not everybody is funny. Some of the lines just aren't delivered that well. A lot of the voices, I know there's a lot of the same same voice actors from the Rick and Morty are in the game, obviously, especially Justin Roiland plays so many characters in the show, so of course he plays tons of characters in the game, but the game just doesn't make you want to play it. There's just something off about it. The actual gameplay is fine, the shooting is fine, so it's not that unique. And then you're in a world that just doesn't seem that exciting. It really relies on profanity to be hilarious, which in the right context it can be funny. But I've always said sometimes, and I guess I'll use South Park as an example, sometimes hearing the censored is funnier than hearing someone plain out hit the say the word. And that's preference, right? I there's people who are absolutely in love with High on Life. I don't really get it, because even if you enjoy this comedy so much, the gameplay is just so basic. It is so basic. You go here, shoot some stuff, and your gun's gonna make a joke, and it's either gonna land or it doesn't. So I want to keep playing it because I hear eventually it kind of gets exciting. But just the story's kind of boring, and so these few beats here and there just aren't going to be enough to carry me through. Like, if my Game Pass glitches and shuts me off tomorrow, I'm not going to go out and buy this game, especially for the full $60. I'm very mid on it. It's not terrible. It's not going to go to our Stinker of the Year award next year. I might end up liking it more. But my goodness, I just kind of expected something a little different from them, and it's just so much of the same. Not to also, final point on it, not to just berate it. It launched with it is launching exclusively for now on Xbox Series consoles and PC. For some reason, there was a sort of glitch day one where the game was outputting correctly at your 60 frames, but the images couldn't render at that, so there was not T-posing, but sort of static images running through it.
Yikes.
It's fixed. It's fixed now. You can find some compilations of that. It's really weird because I thought it was giving me just sort of a headache because characters would move and then suddenly jitter. And at first I thought it was part of the game. Then I realized they patched it, and once it plays smoother now. The game does play smoother now. I'll give them that. But that's all I've been playing. 2 games where one I'm really excited to slowly revisit, and the other one which I thought would be my next game to truly play. And I actually am at the point where it's like I just need a break from that. When I play something like Crisis Core, just that keeps me wanting to play it. It's exciting, but it's not a bad time to end off the year with some of these games. That's all I've been up to, though. What have you been playing?
Yeah, and before that, it's funny that you mentioned High on Life. I had been meaning to get into that, and I've seen like a couple videos on it. And it reminds me a lot of like an interactive version of those episodes of Rick and Morty where they're just commercial compilations. So It's all like Justin Roiland like improv basically, and that like stuttering, like you don't know necessarily where it's gonna go thing, I think is like funny in certain contexts. But I could see how like after like 15-20 hours of that, it could get a little exhausting, because Justin Roiland's humor, it's one of those things where it's like you either like it or you don't. Like you're either in on it or it's not really for you. It's a little tough to like for it to grow on you, because I feel like if anything it grates on you. I like Rick and Morty generally speaking, and I feel like even I can get like a little burned out by the end of the seasons of like, okay, yeah, that's enough of that. So yeah, I'm gonna try the game, and judging by what you said, I feel like my reaction is probably not going to be a far difference than you. But yeah, as far as I've been playing, but also continued with Call of Duty. Again, just a campaign. Overall, I like it. It's fun. It's certainly in line with the first Modern Warfare. I have not gotten deep enough to compare it at all to say whether the story is better or worse. But overall, I'm a couple missions in. I think it's generally a pretty good time. Runs beautifully. Looks great. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with that game. And then, so I don't have much thoughts beyond that. But yeah, Crisis Core. Very interesting game. One thing that is interesting about it is I didn't know necessarily what to expect 100%, because the way they were marketing it was, it's this prequel to Final Fantasy VII. We just got Final Fantasy VII Remake, which, because of what Final Fantasy VII is, on the PS1, it was a comprehensive remake. There's nothing from the original game in Final Fantasy VII Remake, just because, again, the level of separation and polish. So, the voice acting, well, obviously they had to make voice acting because the original Final Fantasy doesn't have any. But it was a top to bottom complete remake, a brand new game, effectively, with an old story. With Crisis Core, I would see like little gameplay, which I'm like, oh, wait, no, that looks like the original Crisis Core. it just or it feels like the original Crisis Core, but with like that fresh coat of paint. And now playing that's clear of what it is, and not that they miscommunicated that, but they were not more explicit about the fact that, like, especially when you see the animations, that kind of like very stiff tank turn that still exists in this new version of it. It's new assets, everything's cleaned up, it looks good, it sounds good, plays good, but it's the original Crisis Core. Don't get it twisted on that. And at times it definitely feels like that. And so in moments like that, it does show some of its age, because keep in mind, Crisis Core is an older handheld game on top of that. So there were certainly kind of just like capacity issues of the original that are no longer a thing. So at points it feels a lot stiffer than Final Fantasy VII Remake. Obviously, when you go to, there's a kind of fluidity that newer games have that you don't really realize they had that until you go and play some older games and you feel kind of how rigid those movements are. And so that's kind of what Crisis Core suffers from, if anything, is just some of that age, because again, it's not the same thing as 7 Remake, and so I almost have to compartmentalize it in my head into a different category, where it's not this top to bottom brand new game. I almost have to put it into that remaster territory to fairly assess it, because otherwise I'm going to be critiquing it on things that I don't necessarily feel like are its fault. You know what I mean? When it has these super stiff animations in some of these cutscenes that are not pre-rendered, I could beat it up the game on that. But yeah, ultimately, it's kind of a reskinned old game, if anything. And so I don't want to beat it up on that. But there are valid critiques of this game. Like, overall, I'm really liking it. Let's get it, I'll start there. I really like this game. I love the original Crisis Core, and I'm loving this game so far. And I like this game more than the original Crisis Core because it looks and plays better. End of story. But, beyond that, there are, like, structural issues with it, I guess. Like, you could say it is a little button mashy. So was the original. It is you run 10 feet, here's another fight, you slap X a lot of times, you roll around, and then you rinse and repeat that over and over again. Cutscene, run, slash, cutscene, run, slash, cutscene. That it is repetitive in that way. And I could see that being a turnoff to some people. It's a lot. Again, that's like a technical thing. The PSP could only do so much, so you couldn't have these sprawling, massive open worlds. Things are a lot more compartmentalized, and you have to load into these new sections. And so that differentiates it dramatically from Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is not the most sprawling game in the world, but you can effectively run for large sections and explore different things, where this game has like little areas where there's chests and stuff like that, but generally, you have these areas, you talk to these people, and then you kind of move it. It's a lot more linear in that regard. So I feel like I like this game a lot. The story for me has always been incredibly compelling, so I'm super excited to see some of that like latter half stuff that it gets into. That's where I'm like most excited about. But yeah, it is like a weird position to be, where like once upon a time, especially like let's go back to the PSP days, where you played Final Fantasy VII, and we all loved Final Fantasy VII, of course. But then you had things like Advent Children, Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus. You had these like complementary pieces that in some ways, not in all ways, but in some ways were better than the source material. So it was one of those things that when I was younger, I'd rather play Crisis Core than the original Final Fantasy at that time. Obviously, as I got older and I appreciate older things, I've become to appreciate like the older game more so than Crisis Core or Dirge of Cerberus and stuff like that. But when I was much younger, it was in a position where it's like, yeah, I definitely want to play the action, role-playing, running around, strafing, slashing, playing with this really cool guy named Zack, who's like a goofy young guy that I could relate to maybe a little bit more than stoic Cloud, who didn't have any voice acting at that time. And so I was like much more into Crisis Core. And so once upon a time, yeah, Crisis Core was my jam. Dirge of Cerberus, I loved that game. Almost more than the original game. And now it's in a weird position where we have the original game, at least a part of it, remade. And it's like categorically better than Crisis Core. And that's an interesting position to be now, where it's kind of flipped, where now we have kind of polished versions of both of them that we can kind of hold. But ultimately, Final Fantasy VII Remake got a treatment that Crisis Core didn't get. And so it puts it in a position where there is this little bit of a gap where the source material is not only, you could argue about the story. I know some people like Zack's story and his character progression better than Cloud's. some people feel that way. It's arguable. I think overall, because of how comprehensive 7's story is, it's kind of hard to argue like Crisis Core versus the entirety of Final Fantasy 7. That's a little hard of an argument to make. But yeah, it's just an interesting kind of perspective to have where you have these both on modern consoles right next to each other, presented next to each other for the first time ever, because there was such a big gap between Crisis Core and the original Final Fantasy VII, and then there was such a big gap between Final Fantasy VII Remake and Crisis Core. Now that we have them both together, I think for the first time I can kind of really examine both of them next to each other, and yeah, there is a little bit of a gap, but I think generally I'm happy with the treatment it got. I didn't think it needed a ground-up remake, so the remaster treatment I think is sufficient, but I think some people who jumped into Final Fantasy VII for the first time through Remake, which is a sizable amount of people. I think a lot of people are sleeping on how many people played Final Fantasy VII Remake. That was their first Final Fantasy VII related things that they ever consumed. This might be a step back for them, and I think it might be a little jarring for some people who didn't play Crisis Core on PSP, who never touched that, and played 7 Remake and like, ooh, a prequel, and they jump into it and they're like, why does it feel like that? You know what I mean? Or like, why is it structured like that? Or why do people moving like that? I think that might be jarring to some people, you know, especially maybe younger gamers who didn't grow up on that, and to some degree, I think people our age, we have like a threshold for jank that I think newer gamers might not. You know, we grew up on that PS1, PS2, Dreamcast jank. Like, we grew up on that. So I think there's a tolerability that we have for that even like, and every generation's like that. Even you could say like people older than us, you know, the 35 crowd, the 40 crowd, that might have a tolerance for 8-bit limited stuff that maybe you and I might not even be trying to deal with, or Atari, like where you have a game that you just pew for 30 minutes and that's everything the game's got. They might even have a tolerance. So every generation is different, that I feel like it might be a little jarring for them, but as to not go too much longer, overall I'm happy with it. I'm having a good time with it. Am I gonna be like addicted to it in the same way that I was to like 7 Remake? Probably not, just because of the way the game's structured, but overall I'm digging it. I'm liking what they did there, and I appreciate that it's only $50 too. They didn't hit us over the head with the 70, which is good. That means that, okay, a developer understands what they're delivering here, as opposed to some other developers that have done some remakes that have hit us completely over the head with the 70. And again, not a shot at Last of Us at all, but other people, because I think Last of Us again was pretty comprehensive of a remake. Yeah, overall, solid time, and I'm excited to see kind of how those more compelling latter half stuff and where things get a lot heavier, how does that translate into kind of with modern visuals and stuff like that. I'm pretty excited about that. Because almost objectively, the first half of the game is the weakest point of it, and then it gets a lot stronger as the story progresses, and you get into, you know, the Zack and the Angeal and the Sephiroth, all that stuff that I'm really excited to touch for the first time, because it's been a really long time since I've played this game.
No, yeah, same. It's always just been such a hassle to play it.
Yeah, for sure, man.
As much as we've talked about emulating wrong, we also just like to buy games and play them on our new systems. You know, if that's what's available. And now, luckily, like I said, it's so nice to just that it's available.
Yeah, and it's like in 2022, I think like cracking out the PSP and playing a 25-30 hour experience on the PSP or Vita is easier said than done at this point. Even just the way your hands adjust, you know, now we got the Steam Deck and the Switch. It is not easy. I don't care what nobody says. It is not easy to play the PSP with grown man hands for that long. I don't know how people were doing it back in the day. I can't do it that well. So it is really nice to be able to sit on my couch and have like a proper, beautiful version of Crisis Core for the first time in my life. You know, it's like, so I remember like when like Advent Children was just like the most beautiful thing that you've ever seen, and all we ever hoped was to be able to play versions of the games we loved that just looked like that. You know what I mean? Like Dirge of Cerberus, good looking game at that time, but obviously like it was limited to the cutscenes where things got really beautiful. Same thing with Crisis Core. And for the first time in history, we're actually able to play things that, like, Final Fantasy VII Remix looks better than Advent Children. I don't know, like, undeniably. Like, I don't know if you've watched that movie recently, but like that movie looks beautiful, but like 7 Remake is right there with it. And that's pretty cool to have these like masterful games in the visuals that we always wanted it by.
Yeah, no, that's very true. It's dreams come true.
You just gotta wait like 25 years and then your dreams come true, basically. All right, so we're going to get into the main reason why we're here today, Steve. It's the Neo Vintage Game Awards. Basically, we always cover all these different game awards and who won what. We just did the Game Awards, Jeff Keighley's thing, and we kind of gave our thoughts. And some we agree with, some not so. And we talked about this last year of wanting to basically do our own Game Awards, where we have our own categories, we can do our own nominations, and decide who we feel are the best winners of the year and non-winners of the year, but we'll get into that. And so, Steve, we're going to start with the big category. We'll get that out of the way. We don't want to keep people waiting. Game of the year. When I hear Game of the Year, I think of the best thing that we had to offer this year, the best thing that the game industry had to offer this year. So, Steve, do me a solid here. Read us the nominations for this category, and then we can discuss the winner.
Yep. So our nominations, we had Elden Ring, obviously. We had God of War Ragnarok. We had Vampire Survivor. And we had to at least sort of look in the direction The Last of Us.
But it's cheating to make it win.
So it's we can't make it win. It's cheating. It is, of course. I appreciate what it is, though I had a terrible experience with it. But that's my PlayStation.
You went through it.
I don't know what's going on with that. But all in all, that's the four main games that we talked about that were just almost at peak perfection, right? No game's perfect, right? But if we had to pick some, these are definitely some of the top ones of the year.
And just a little drum roll, please. Brrr. Our winner is, of course, God of War Ragnarok. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer there. I mean, Elden Ring was like right there for me, as we kind of discussed right before this. But Ragnarok's hard to beat, man. I mean, it's that perfect line that I feel like almost Sony first parties have mastered of like this brilliant gameplay and this solid story and just cutting out the fluff. That's what I love about Ragnarok, where it's like it can be as deep as you want it to be, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. So you get this super clean, I think it's about like, let's say 20 to 25 hours experience where you're in, you're out. If you want to go to the other realms and spend tons of time killing out all these like side stories and collecting gear, you can do that. But if you want a linear story experience, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. And if you want, you could adjust the difficulty and have something closer to maybe like an interactive movie, or you can have something pretty grueling if you'd like. And it's that kind of modularity in the experience that I think is so masterful that, yeah, the Sony first party is killing it with that right now. And specifically, they killed it with, God of War 2018. And here we are with the sequel that I feel like a lot of us had concerns about it even be able to match up with that, and they delivered, in my opinion. So I'm very glad that we went with Game of the Year being God of War. What are your thoughts overall about this being the Game of the Year?
No, yeah, we're good. Again, we went back and forth about Elden Ring, God of War, Elden Ring, God of War.
Yeah.
But when you think about how much Elden Ring is just obscure and how much of that obscurity some people love, and I know the diehard fans of From love that, but when you think of a complete journey, God of War Ragnarok took it for me, where Elden Ring, again, I didn't love everything I did in Elden Ring. It was interesting, it was definitely off guard, but I think that whole journey, I think I clocked in maybe 24 hours to beat just the run through of God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah.
And infamously, besides one small chapter, I loved everything about it. Even looking back, that one chapter, though it was not game breaking, but definitely pace breaking, the game is just overall just almost flawless. It's just these small moments throughout the game kept me just so excited, where Elden Ring, once you got a sort of control of how you wanted your character to play, then it was pretty much from there on out forever. If you were spawning a dragon head to spit fire at every boss, then though you can't pull that off everywhere, but you understood what you were trying to do. Where God of War Ragnarok, I never really knew where the game was going. And it just did all the right things. It had the story to carry it. It had the gameplay that was engaging. It had worlds that were exciting to see. Characters that were just amazing. And it's the stuff that even from before we played Ragnarok, I dinged Elden Ring for. The very lack of direction, lack of story, lack of just this something to really pull you through. I know it's supposed to be that way. I understand From Software games. I know the direction they're going. But I don't see what the harm would have been of giving you some cutscenes that weren't just these giant enemy intros. So that's why I at first I was feeling Elden Ring, but when I just looked back at it, I said, no, God of War Ragnarok took it for me.
Yeah, Elden Ring masterfully designed, but yeah, they have just a different approach to presenting their narrative. FromSoft always does it like that, where it's like you really need to work for, and the perfect term for it is just lore. Elden Ring doesn't have a story; it has lore. It has a lot of details and concepts that kind of inform the world that you're occupying. But if you don't hunt for that, none of it is presented to you. You'll have this kind of smorgasbord of different visuals that you're going to encounter in quick cutscenes in Elden Ring. But if you don't dive deeper to actually like read what they're presenting to you, you won't know what it's about. As opposed to, God of War, which as you're working on, again, it's that cinematic kind of masterpiece of these brilliantly directed moments between the different characters that left a lasting impression on me in terms of just the narrative, where Elden Ring presented itself as more of like a cultural moment. I think that was a moment that all of us, it was collaborative for some people went through it alone, but it's one of these things where like you kind of just, it's this grinding, hard, grueling journey that has this brilliant payoff that I think is why kind of FromSoft is kind of in a league of their own in terms of the type of games that they produce. But when it comes to something that I think I spend time in the shower thinking about the narrative of, it's God of War that really takes it there for me. And again, everybody's different. Maybe some people sit there and think about the brilliant world that George R.R. Martin kind of helped craft for Elden Ring. But for me personally, yeah, Ragnarok really did it for me, and I think it's a kind of a testament to how strong this year was in terms of some of the output, where it's like we got the sequel to God of War that I think in terms of the sequel that maybe made everybody pretty paranoid, where it's like after God of War 2018, it's like I don't know if they could do this again, like how great 2018. In my opinion, they stuck the landing. You could argue which one's better, which one's worse, whatever, but in terms of like actually delivering something that is not like they didn't mess up. Sophomore slump did not happen to them, and I think that is not an easy thing to do, especially the fact that they switched directors between the two, and that was one thing that had all of us sweating when we knew that Corey was not going to be involved in the second one. I think all of us were just like, oh no, like this is not good. And we would hear little stories where people were like, up until like pretty close to launch, we were concerned that like this game was not good. This is from the developer saying that. And then they deliver something and it's like actually really, really solid. Like shout out to them. Not easy to do. Shout out to Santa Monica. And I guess we can move on to the next category, which I think is going to be a fun one. And I think people can make an argument that it's mean-spirited, but sometimes you got to be mean to these disgusting games that they've released sometimes. So this is our next category, Stinker of the Year. It's a phrase that I coined because sometimes these games are stinker. I think, what was it, Watch Dogs that led me to creating this term?
I think that's the one that started it.
Yeah, Watch Dogs Legion. Yeah, an absolute stinker of the year. Disgusting. I gag at the thought of some of these games. These are the nominees we got. We got Saints Row, Crossfire X, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and Rainbow Six Extraction. And Steve, what was the game that we settled on being the stinker of the year?
We settled down on this year the stinker of the year, a game that just was multiple reasons just bad. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet,
wins.
Which I know, that wins the one category you don't want to win, and we know that's divisive, right? We know that the diehards are there, and you and I are pretty big Pokemon fans, OG Pokemon fans.
Off rip, yeah.
So the fact is that a lot of the stuff we saw prior to the game release stopped us from purchasing this game. You and I usually buy these games, even when we're slightly feeling worried about it. You and I are huge Saints Row fans. And even though all the signs were there and the reviews had started to come out, you before I did, but at least you purchased it before I did. I think a week later I got it, and because I was too just wrapped up in it. But when you get a game that just, a lot of my issues with Saints Row, none of them are technical. A lot of my issues with Pokemon are technical, though, like we've talked about before on here and off cam. this Pokemon series has been struggling for a long time just because it's always is attached to very underpowered hardware. You know, since the 3DS, like we've been talking, ever since they went to that, leaving it completely pixels, the games have struggled between frame rates, draw distances, but none of that's ever been so abruptly like in, you know, Scarlet and Violet, where I've seen apparently in the first cutscene when it first, before you get to create your character or whatever, and the screen goes dark, everyone on screen freezes T-pose, and that's stuff that we haven't seen since infamously Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah.
Though you know, as bad as Crossfire X and as bad as Rainbow Six Extraction were all around, I just don't think there was any expectations for those games to be good. I don't think anyone expected them to be good. I think everybody expected them to be kind of flops. I don't think everybody expected Rainbow Six Extraction to be such a flop where after one night I didn't want to play it anymore. And Crossfire X legit just didn't work, but I just don't know anyone else who even played it. So how can we hate on a game that nobody wanted to play?
Nobody paid attention to anyways.
Nor did it work, or you know, your main campaign was broken up into like $5.99 DLC things you had to do. It was super weird of a release. But when you have a Pokemon game, the next mainline Pokemon game, completely on the Switch, and it just is nowhere near what we needed it to be or wanted it to be, especially with Sword and Shield with such apparently mixed views. I thought the game was fine. I wasn't a huge fan of Legends Arceus. Oh, here's some of the good ideas from Arceus to Pokemon, but you just fumbled it. You completely fumbled it. And I'll say it too. Some of these Pokemon designs suck. Let me tell you. I know they're running out of ideas. I know we're over 1,000 Pokemon. My goodness, these are terrible designs. So for our stinker of the year, unfortunately, with heavy heart, we have to give it to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet.
Yeah. It's one of those things where at this point, as a franchise, this game has caused them to need to win me back. Like, I've given up on Pokemon, which is not something I saw happening because, as you said, like, I've been with them throughout this and the ups and the downs, you know, the ups being the blacks and whites where everybody loved it, the downs being, you know, Omega Ruby where people were not really rocking with it. Some people were upset during the Let's Go times, and I played all those games. And, you know, I would go in very similar to Call of Duty. Casually, I'd play my, 15 to 20 hours of it, and then I'd move on. And generally, I would enjoy it. And, you know, for a long time, they've had that major criticism of, like, it's the same thing over and over and over again. And that was fair. But then again, they spaced it out a year. You know, it was enough time for me to kind of go in, like, you know, I'm going to do my little yearly exodus into Pokemon. And it was one of those things where I looked at what they presented, and I'm like, that's not good enough. It's not worth my time. And that was a sad reality to be like, where it's like looking, I'm like, just being completely honest, and I know this is harsh, like Game Freak just don't got it. Like they just, it's over. And at this point, like until I see something that I think is like acceptable, I'm not touching this franchise again. And the reality is because like I'm just looking at the rest of the game industry. And we're talking about like a game, they're unable to get a GameCube looking game running on the same hardware that ran a version of Doom Eternal. Are you seriously? Like, are you for real? Like, and it's to the point where I'm looking at Sony doing God of War and Last of Us remakes. You know, Ghost of Tsushima was some time ago at this point. We got even Microsoft, beautiful Forza games. You have games like Halo Infinite. Say what you want about that game, but it's beautiful and runs nice. And then this is the best you can do, Game Freak? Like, for real. Like, are you on? Like, I see indie games with single-digit teams outputting games that look 3 times as good as this and run 3 times as good. And I'm not a graphics whore. Don't get it twisted. Like, I'm not one of these people who need beautiful visuals, you know. We'll get to it, but some of my favorite games of this year, you know, Vampire Survivor is a collection of pixels on the screen. So I'm not everything about, like, visual fidelity, but I think there's something to be said about, like, finding an art style that works for you and moving from there. And Pokemon has almost never looked this bad and has never run this bad and has never innovated this little. You know what I mean? Like, I think with other franchises that I think occupy similar genres where you'll have like these kind of like different battle things, you know, systems, you have different RPGs, and over time these franchises have found new ways to present themselves to kind of change with the times and do different things and keep people entertained. And I can't point to a single franchise that I think have tried so little and it's like mega evolutions. Like, really, that's what you consider innovation? And so it's like, for me, this game has caused me to just abandon the franchise in its entirety, and it's something that I will always pay attention to because I grew up with this franchise. I've played every single entry that has been released, almost as it's been released. Some of them, it's been staggered a month or two after release. I picked up a copy or something like that, but generally speaking, yeah, I jumped into every game and I played it and I beat it. And this is the first one where I'm just like, nah, I'm not doing it. It's not worth my time anymore. Where it's like, as I've entered adulthood and you work full time and you're juggling a lot of things, you only have so much time to burn on experiences. And Pokemon has finally passed that threshold where it's like, it's not worth the money and the time it takes to and go through that experience. And if there was a Nintendo Game Pass, maybe I'd play it for that. But until there is, I don't think Pokemon's worth my time. And I think it would be in Pokemon's best interest to somehow separate themselves from Game Freak as soon as possible. Because some of the best Pokemon experiences I've had have been like unrelated to Game Freak. Like when you look at like a Brilliant Diamond, which is not even that good of a game, but like I think captured the original spirit of what I liked about Pokemon more efficiently. It's not even done by Game Freak, and it ran so much better than a lot of the other Pokemon games. That's sad. Same thing with Let's Go. It's not even the same theme, and it ran so much better. And it's like, how sad is that game that's like 3 generations, or not even 3 generations, but like 3 games removed in the past, looks and feels so much better than a game that came out like a couple weeks ago. It's like, come on, man. So yeah, absolute stinker. To hell with all of them. Next category, best narrative, best story. We're talking strictly story here. Who killed it in the story department? And we got, of course, yet again, God of War. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's undeniable. I do want to give a shout out to Matt Sophos and Richard Zangrade Gobert. Sorry if I'm butchering your name here. Those are the 2 lead writers of God of War Ragnarok. I just wanted to give them a shout out. We spoke a little bit already about this story, but tell me, Steve, like what did you think about this game from just a story perspective? Take out the visuals, take out the gameplay. What did you think about just the story?
Yeah, I remember launching this on launch day and being almost nervous. We hadn't seen much of God of War. We saw that Sony was keeping it so close to the vest. They waited a long time to confirm it was releasing. And it was interesting, right? Because I thought the story in God of War 2018 was... It was complete, right? There was a beginning that we didn't see, which is everything that happens with his wife prior to. Yeah. A middle and an end. Obviously, there's a big teaser at the end of the first one that leads into this one. But I didn't know how that was going to exactly portray, especially when we knew that they were taking so much source material from the actual mythology. And I guess it's not a spoiler because everybody thinks it's obvious more than anything that Thor is in God of War Ragnarok. Yeah. He's at the end of God of War 2018. And I just didn't know how this was going to work. What was this going to be like to see a version of Thor? Were they going to MCU-ify him? Were they going to change it? And we didn't know, right? We saw we were getting the more bulky, bigger, rounder Thor, which is more in line with who he is. But what does that mean? So once you start playing it and you have... I'm going to be as spoiler-free as I can, just for anyone who's listening. When you have your first meeting at your table, and it is one of the most just well-written, well-directed, well-voiced, tense. I watched that scene constantly, and that was 20-something hours ago in my game time, because it was just from moment to moment, from delivery, line to line. You have Mimir talking, Kratos is talking, Thor's talking, another character's talking, Atreus is there, and you don't know what's going to go on. You have no idea what's going to lead to. It's those moments that just completely take the game away. And it's something that just constantly I wanted to see, where's this going? I'm not even a person who's super worried about spoilers usually. Some of 2018 had gotten spoiled to me before I had beaten it and it wasn't a big deal. I went on blackout mode for this because as soon as I started seeing, alright, they know what they did with this writing, characters, story, narrative, where they're going with this whole tale you're telling me. I was like, I can't let this, especially this being attentively the end of the Norse saga, I just was like, I can't have this ruined for me. And that's how I knew the story was that good and was being delivered. It's all about the delivery. I didn't care about the what happened. It was more on how it happened and how it was shown to me. So that's why, hands down, it was without a choice God of War Ragnarok for me.
Yeah, and it goes even, deeper, especially once you look at some of the themes that I think this era of God of War has played with. And I feel like Ragnarok doesn't necessarily introduce too many new themes, but it certainly expands on everything that was presented. The kind of major pillars I think that this story, and not to get into spoilers at all, kind of cover are the ideas of grief and fatherhood, and what it means to be a father in his position, and especially kind of dealing with this idea of like redemption and what you deserve judging by your past actions, and how to let go of certain things, and what does it mean to truly prepare your child for the world and keep them, prepare them for the worst, but at the same time trying to shield them from these almost inevitable reality where ultimately they're gonna face the world, and how do you occupy that space. And it's so awesome to see kind of Kratos's story arc, seeing him from, again, the people who played that initial trilogy, this just like hammer of a man just destroying everything around him. And again, the first kind of arc that you would see in those first trilogies is this idea of like rage and revenge and vengeance, and what does it mean to kind of strike back in an anger when you feel like you've been done wrong. And in the second kind of phase of Kratos' life, what I love about it so much is it's this reluctancy to not be what he had been for so long, and to do everything in his power to shield Atreus from becoming that same thing. And so yeah, I think they just so masterfully kind of been, put him in this position where he's almost like forced to reconcile his past while not being his past. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And again, we can expand more on all these this conversation during our spoiler cast, which will be our next episode of the show. But yeah, like they just absolutely did a monster job. So shout out to the writers for this. Next one, I'm very excited to talk about. Best art direction. I'm talking visuals here, just visuals. And I don't see a game that is prettier. There are things in. Actually, it's something that I want to nominate right here on the spot that we forgot to talk about, but I want to nominate it, but it's not a winner. 2 nominations. We got Stray, and I want to throw Kirby Forbidden Lands into there. Beautiful game. I got to give them their credit. Gorgeous game. Otherwise, pretty old hardware at this point. And it has such a beautiful art direction that I think, especially if you play it on an OLED Switch, bruh, gorgeous. But I'm going to have to give it to Stray. That beautiful post-apocalyptic meets cyberpunk, worn down, rust, overgrown forest look of it is just, make every wallpaper on every device I have that, please. It's just such a beautiful game. So our winner is Stray for best art direction. I want to give a shout out to Kula and Viv. They are the main directors for this game, and I believe they also doubled as the art directors again because they both had passed in art direction in general. They were both artists, so I want to give a shout out to them for Stray. Steve, I know you liked Stray a lot, and I think you also liked the visuals of Stray. Talk about that a little bit.
I really did enjoy a lot of Stray. I thought it was really a fun experience. But yeah, ever since the first trailer we saw, which I think it was on a PlayStation showcase maybe
a while ago, yeah,
it was immediately cat, because one, he plays a cat, that's awesome. He plays this cat in this super rundown post-apocalyptic but neon. The people are robots with TV screens, but they still wear clothes, and it's so encapsulating, and it's something so strange. And it's something I've always said that it reminded me so much of the there's that anthology on Netflix, Love, Death, Robots.
Yes. Great call.
Which is just, each episode's different, but a lot of familiar episodes have this almost reminiscent aesthetic of this, and it just brought all those feelings. So having it all together was just really, really cool. So that's why it had my vote. I think is just that direction it went was really cool. Though it was, was it the most realistic cat on screen? No, but it wasn't about that. It was about the world, about the art in the world, exploring it second to second. When you look at wallpapers of it, I'm looking at it right now, and it's just wild. I have a robot with a hat on, wearing a big puffy coat and a scarf, and then you have a cat with a little vest with a robot peeking out of it, and it's just so interesting.
Yeah, it's such
and it's for sure. New, it's fresher.
Yeah, it's such an interesting kind of conglomeration of such interesting art styles. You got, again, that cyberpunk. The Love, Death, Robots is a great observation. I see a little bit of Fooly Cooley in there. I see a little bit of Nier Automata in there, with that kind of like rusted meets new meets overgrown forest thing. I see a lot of that in there too. And it's such an interesting art style that they've chose for that. And say what you want about, some people didn't love the gameplay and didn't maybe love the story that much, but from just a visual perspective, I think they're a perfect example of what I mean when I talk about the importance of art direction in general and having a defined art style, where sometimes the visual fidelity can take a back seat. And that is something that I think you often see kind of mastered on the Nintendo side of things. And so it was awesome to see such a beautiful game on powerful hardware that, did it have the most sharp visuals in the world? No, but it didn't need to, and nobody paid attention to that because of such a great art direction. And that's why it's such an important thing that, like, you can have the most beautiful game in the world that has the sharpest visuals, but if it doesn't have a really good kind of informed direction to it, it's not going to stick with you. And that's why I think Stray really kind of like resonates with people and sticks with people. And I think you're going to see the ripple effects of a game like this in the way that people kind of approach robotics and post-apocalyptic worlds going forward because of games like this. I think that really kind of informs that. Next category, one that I'm particularly excited for, Best Score in Music. Steve, give me the nominations for that.
So we have 2 nominations. So we have Bayonetta 3, giving credit to Naofumi Harada, and Sonic Frontiers by with their lead sound design, Tomoya Otani. I hope I pronounced that somewhat right. And this was music and score is a big part of the experience. It's something that gets you in that moment. You and I are in general just huge music fans,
for sure.
So Jabro, where do we land on this?
Yeah, so ultimately, we had to go with Sonic Frontiers, undeniable. You played a lot of it more than me, but, I feel like I had like a short little stint with it, and even I was like blown away by it, where it's like, say what you want about Sonic Frontiers. Generally, people received it really well, but that music, man, hits. Everything from the light sound design of the world as you're kind of running around, even to the stage music, which I think Sonic has always had such a great relationship with music, where I think that's one thing that sticks around with a lot of people. When you talk about Sonic Adventure 2, for example, there's just as many people talking about the gameplay moments and the fun things, all the way to like Escape the City, these classic songs that kind of just like stuck the test of time. Sonic Frontiers really excels in those small moments where you're running around the vistas that they've crafted and the small little audio designs, everything to some of the themes that they've chosen for boss fights and stuff like that. Yeah, so I was a big fan, and I know you're the Sonic guy, so go ahead and talk about all of how great the Sonic Frontiers OST is.
Yeah, no, it is really fantastic. It's really encapsulating. I know the game had, again, a lot of people loved it. Some people didn't like it. Some just weren't feeling it at the moment. But one thing I think almost generally everyone's agreed on is the amazing music. And that's something Sega's always known for. I mean, Tomoya Otani. This is a guy who's done.
He's a vet.
He's a vet. Choo Choo Rocket, Skies of Arcadia, Sonic Adventures, Billy Hatcher, Space Channel 5's Heroes. Again, like every Sonic since then. He knows what he's doing when it comes to music. He was even brought on for like Smash Brothers and stuff like that. So he's the big deal. But it breaks it down to all of it. So you have that calming overworld music that everyone seems to like. I put it on constantly. You had the more sort of digital remix of the stages, the more conventional Sonic stages, some being remixed of the classic, like there's that remix of Sky Sanctuary that is just beautiful to listen to. Have it on all the time. It's absolutely great. And then you get that what I always say, that Sonic Adventure sort of fan pleasing in the big boss fights. You have these full on vocal music. There's Undefeatable, and there's another one I forgot what it. Break Through It All, Find Your Flame, which are fantastic songs, even if you remove them from the fact that they're attached to a Sonic game. And it's just overall really great. I mean, you have One OK Rock, a band that you actually turned me on to years ago, comes and does not the finale music, but whatever it is, the outro as they call it, and it's just fantastic. It's just hands down when you have all three versions of like, here it is with some lyrics, and here's with this, and here's with this. It's just absolutely great. Even taking my bias out of it, hands down, the music and score is just fantastic in this game.
Yeah, I really liked it. Missing one thing, I'd say, unfortunately, no Knuckles rap, but, I'll allow it.
Maybe in the DLC.
I wish. The next one, I mean, is kind of a no-brainer. I think it's the most obvious thing to anybody who played this game. Best performance of the year, we had to give it to Christopher Judge's Kratos. Let's not even waste no time, with other nominations. This guy, I mean, he is a monster in voice acting. I mean, and the thing is, Kratos is not easy. I feel like a lot of people sleep on how difficult Kratos could be because, it's a lot of grunts, it's a lot of stoicism, but there is this inherent, like, pain that Christopher Judge captures so well. In there, where you have these moments where you could feel the gritting of the teeth behind him holding back his frustration in these moments, trying to keep his composure, or this pain where you could see he's still grieving his wife, but he finds the need to keep this strong face on him, and all of that is conveyed through just the voice alone, let alone the facial voice acting and all that stuff. Christopher Judge absolutely murdered. He is no stranger to this scene. His credits go way far back. I actually used to watch him as a kid in Stargate, so I have a long history with Christopher Judge. But yeah, he is a monster in this role, and I'm so glad that he took this role, because again, he's not the original Kratos voice actor, and a lot of I remember in 2018 there was a tremendous amount of disappointment by some people that they changed voice actors, and I mean, boy, did he make it his own. Where it's like, to go back to the old guy, which again, shout out to him. I don't know his name offhand. He killed it too. Man, Christopher Judge he killed it on this one. What'd you think?
This was the easiest choice. I'm glad everyone pretty much has decided that just his performance is just so encapsulating of who Kratos is now. And it's just hard to talk. It's hard to think Kratos and not think Christopher Judge. You hear that voice now, and it's weird because I've seen some TikToks and videos of everyone showing some old Kratos to new Kratos, and I understand completely different timing, and different Kratoses in a sense. But I never correlated that. But when I see Christopher Judge, I hear the voice, and he really just took something his own and completely do it. I do remember when there was a big dilemma when he revoiced Terrace Carson, I think.
Okay.
The original Kratos.
You remember that, right? Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. I remember it was a while when it came out that it wasn't him. We didn't know for so long. But the fact that he just completely encapsulated it to the point where he's like, I'm going to be the one in the mocap suit. I'm going to be doing this. You see some of his behind the scenes of him in the mocap suit and having these dilemmas where someone's calling him a monster and he's just struggling. You see his lip trembling, and that's all part of just the performance and who he is. He is Kratos.
Yeah, he is, for sure.
He is. I mean, we'll talk about it at some point. Amazon's going forward with the God of War show. And I know he himself would said, he goes, why would I not be Kratos? It'd be great. Will they cast him? Most likely not. I don't know why.
It'd be stupid not to.
It'd be stupid not to, especially since, again, small divergence, they are jumping into 2018 God of War.
Yeah.
They aren't doing the Greece saga.
Thank goodness.
So it wouldn't make sense, but absolutely fantastic performance. It is wild. Some of the best. I mean, the last time I saw something like this is, you're thinking when I originally experienced The Last of Us, where Troy Baker and them took that to town.
Exactly.
Christopher Judge, just trying to think, may have even surpassed that. It's been a while since we've seen Troy Baker in a role, but amazing.
For sure. And I could only hope that, like, with how much he just killed this role that maybe we can just see him in more different roles in bigger budget games. Now people are going to be, taking him serious. I think people definitely took him seriously for 2018. I think Ragnarok solidified what we kind of already knew, that this guy is kind of a little different. Him, Atreus, Freya, like the whole cast is just insane. So
yeah, and I think it's funny between the two God of Wars. I don't have it up in front of me. I might be making it up, but isn't he T'Challa in the Square Enix Avengers game?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, I think I heard that too.
If I lightly recall that is him. So he's got range. He's
gonna stay with a job going forward. I know that. Next one, hit us with that next category.
Yeah, so the next one, best indie game, which is, it's been a strong year for indies. It was a lot of small little indie games that have come out. So the first one up, we have Vampire Survivor. Next, we have Stray, Cult of the Lamb, and Nobody Saves the World. Now, definitely some great choices here. They all hit in different ways. But I think it's obvious the way we've been talking about it basically all year. Who did we have to definitely give this to?
It's the reason why we decided to do this show, Steve. Vampire Survivor. Shout out to Luca Galante, the developer for this.
Yeah, man.
It's just, come on. No game really, I think, captures the spirit of why I love indie gaming in general, which is, it's a couple reasons. One thing, I think he's the perfect example, or this game is a perfect example of how to do so much with so little. It's a simple concept that is so addictive, so fun. He does not hit us over the head in the price department, which I so appreciate in this era of getting less and less bang for your buck in terms of some of these mainstream offerings, where you get these games that are hitting $70 plus, and they're offering so little because so much is locked behind, DLC. You got to pay for this, you got to buy this, microtransaction this, and in this game, we're talking about like what, $4 or something like that. DLC being like $2 or something like that. On sale, I got it for like $179 for the DLC I just bought. Just such an immense. It's so. How did you put the DLC on sale? I love that. This guy's. It's amazing.
Day one.
And yeah, it's just such an incredible game and so fun and addicting. And I literally was playing it yesterday. But Steve, you're the one who put me onto this game, so I know you have an appreciation just as much as I do about this game. So tell me about that.
Yeah, it is a game that's just kind of slick. I believe it went into early access very late last year, but like December last year. But then it was all the time in this year, and it fully released out of early access this year. But yeah, what a game to get you by. You need an analog stick, and that's it. And you need a button to push OK on menus.
Yeah, just a menu button. Yeah.
Besides that, it is a game you just walk the stick. I remember when I first launched it, I'm trying to hit buttons to see what does what, and nothing. I was like, man, what did I just spend? At that time, I bought it in early access, so it was whatever, $2.99. I think it's up to $5.99, and then it's almost like on a permanent sale constantly. And I was like, what did I just do? And I remember being like, all right, it is what it is. But I remember laying in my bed that night. My daughter was asleep. My wife was asleep. I pulled out the good old Steam Deck. I was like, yeah, a couple megabytes. And I remember just going and going and going. And then I realized I was like, I wasn't listening to a podcast. I wasn't doing anything else. And I was just laser focused on. I was like, man, I wonder what the vampire looks like. And, jokes on me, there was no vampire at the time. I think they may have updated it and now he's in there. But there was no vampire. And I just was so curious. What does this character do? What does this do? What's this item do? Why is this garlic so amazing? Can I get a garlic now? Can I get it now? And it was just an incredible game that I took at such a random moment. To being like, let's see what Vampire Survivor has and what someone had a friend of mine had mentioned it to me, and I was like, yeah, okay. He also plays like weird games, sometimes those clicking games and those auto cookie games.
Yeah.
All some of those. He plays great games. Plays a lot. Plays God of War Ragnarok. Played all that stuff. But when he suggested something like this, and I see the price, and you see the little icon with that, I don't know, lady like this with a portal or whatever, it's like, what is this, man? But I remember when I played it, I think the next day we had an episode, and I was glad we did, because I was like, I need to share this. But yeah, absolutely, a game we've put and continue to put more time into. Just got some DLC. I think I purchased it to obviously support him in every way I can. Fantastic.
Yeah, I remember when you told me to check this game out, and I looked at it, and I was like, okay, well, everybody knows, big Castlevania fan, so I'm like, all right, I'm a little skeptical. I'm like, all right, you're stepping into my territory here. You better deliver. And I remember the first character you got that little whip guy, who subsequently I'd have never used since. But you start out with the little whip guy, and he's like, I killed an enemy or two, and I realized, it's like an auto attack thing, and I'm like moving around, and I'm in this little grassland. And I paused it for a second. I remember pausing it for a second. I was like, Steve, man, you owe me $4, man. What is this? What do we? You sold it on the podcast, and then you didn't tell me much about it. I remember you told me to just check it out, but you didn't tell me much. You said there was an auto attacking thing, and that it's addictive, and that's all you really told me. And that it looks kind of like Castlevania-ish, like there's a lot of Castlevania themes. And so I'm playing it, and I'm like, what is this, Steve? What do you got me playing here? And then I remember I collected a couple of the little XP orbs or whatever you call them. And I got the Holy Bible for the first time, and that starts rotating around me, and I start killing a couple more enemies. I see that number going up. I'm like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. Oh, wand. And then I got a little wand move, and that starts shooting out. And it's like a homing attack. It's like targeting certain people, and I got the flames going out. I got the bird hovering around me and start killing enemies around. And next thing you know, these enemies are getting tough, but they're not touching me. I'm like, oh. And then I died. And I was like, oh. Well, I can't leave it like that. I didn't unlock anything. And so I remember starting another game and, had a similar experience. And then I died again. And I died so many times in a row. And then I was like, all right, that was really fun. I'm getting a little better with each turn. All right, but that's enough for now. I'll play a little bit more tomorrow. It's cool for little short spurts, right? Short spurts. And then I look at the clock. 2 hours passed. I kid you not. I lie to you not. 2 hours had passed. I didn't even notice it. And I was like, no way. No way that I just burned 2 hours moving in circles, moving around. No way that I did that. And then so the next time I do that, but this time I put on a podcast, and I remember, it's the same experience. I'm not joking. 4 hours had passed. I had gone through 2 podcasts or something like that, and I'm getting better. And then next thing you know, this is my favorite game of the year, damn near. And at this point, I've unlocked, I think, everything I can. I'm still, there's small things in different modes I'm still working on. It's one of those things. Now, my goals, I got to hit level 80, and some of my matches last upwards of 35 minutes sometimes on a single run. But yeah, man, that game is brilliant, and I just want to shout out to that guy. That I think he's a perfect example of how you can do you can have such a simple premise and deliver on it. And it's the spirit of kind of old school video gaming. This is what they used to do on the NES, the Super Nintendo, the Genesis, where it's it's a simple concept, but it's these addictive arcade style loops that are not trying to sell you on a whole bunch of crazy things, don't have the most compelling narratives in the world. It's just raw fun. It's the reason why I go to play video games, and I'm not going to sit there on HBO Max and watch a new movie or why I'm watching anime. It's something unique to the medium that I think are so beautiful. And for indie games, I just got to give a title where it's hey, yeah, in terms of raw hours played, this single developer extracted more time than a Sony first-party team could, than From Software could. And that, I think, is commendable. And it's not just me, it's not just you. If you look at the raw stats on it, this guy is moving units. And I don't think I've seen a game really capture the hearts and minds of gamers like this. Maybe since Shovel Knight. Maybe you can make an argument. I forget the name of it. There's this platformer with this little guy with a mask. There's a new one coming out, the Silk Song thing. I forget the name of it, but
Hollow Knight.
Yeah, Hollow Knight was another one. Shovel Knight, Hollow Knight, stuff like that. And this one I think is right up with there with those guys, where it's an indie game with a simple concept that has really just locked in on people, and people just get it, and it just works. And yeah, I got to give them a shout out for that. The next one is a very competitive category for me. It was not a tough. It was kind of a tough discussion, but we had to lock in on one. It's best action adventure game. Our categories are God of War Ragnarok, Elden Ring, Bayonetta, and Ghostwire Tokyo. For me personally, and then we ultimately both kind of agreed on this, in terms of action adventure, especially honing in on the adventure portion, it had to be Elden Ring. When it came from Elden Ring versus God of War in the previous categories, the idea was God of War just has that story that captured us. But in terms of just going on that adventure, that sprawling world, that excellent action and action choreography and combat design, it's hard to beat Elden Ring. Like, I don't really know if anybody was really that close. I loved me some Bayonetta, great action, really fun set piece moments. Ghostwire Tokyo, amazing combat situation. It almost felt like being like Doctor Strange in Tokyo. And God of War, it's kind of like more of what they did in 2018, expanded a little bit. Just a brilliant combat system. But Elden Ring, that's what FromSoft does, man. Combat, precision combat, the pixel perfect. You just need to just get out of the way and understand, the actual design of this enemy and how they've been kind of designed to hurt you, and you have to almost die to understand how everything works. It's just such an interesting kind of approach to game design. It's a very actually old school style of game design where you really like need to just die to figure it out. That's kind of like a very Mega Man type thing. And yeah, man, Elden Ring killed it in that category. What do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Especially when you focus on the action part of action adventure. When you focus on the adventure part, this game had it from that moment to moment. I'm talking true adventure. That old line, it's the journey, not the destination, and that's very, very more than true than ever in Elden Ring. It is the adventure of it. Is there a good story in there? Yeah, somewhere. Are there some cool bosses? Some of them you might miss. But you can't talk about that nothing happened. It's not like you explored for 30 minutes, nothing happened. No, you explored, you broke a box, and that caused a giant bear to summon, or some weird... I don't remember what I did. I remember going in a cave, and I thought it was just picking up a weapon. No, it teleports me, and I fight a ghost deer.
Yeah, I know what you...
Beautiful blue ghost deer. And then you get very close to beat it, and it pulls out some wild move, and that's where the action comes in. You gotta hit that. If you didn't construct your character in specific ways and you didn't master the parry system, then you were never getting anything done. And that's that one thing, and it's something I still crave so often, and it's still installed, and I can't wait to get back to it. Again, I think I left off at a perfect point where I can spend some time, refamiliarize myself with it, and then continue on my journey. But it's just something that is what an adventure game needs. That's what I want it to be when I go explore, when I go up a mountain, and it's not just, oh, look at this vista, take a screenshot, and now jump down. No, it's you got up there, you fought a bunch of dead things on your way up, and when you get up there, another masterful dead thing that wants to destroy you. Or you want to climb this mountain? Well, too bad, there's an eyeball watching you that's gonna burn you. What? Are you kidding me? I have to stealth upon an eyeball so I can even continue to get to the castle. That's the stuff that's just out of nowhere. And it's something that's not really present in the other From games. The combat and all that stuff. Yes, some of that stuff we've seen, but that world and exploring it and having the stuff that isn't combat related also so good is why I for sure had to give it to Elden Ring. That's where it edged it out for me.
Yeah, totally. Now hit me with that next category.
All right, next category. Best RPG. RPG, kind of a loose term sometimes, means a lot of things. Sometimes just equipping something makes it an RPG. Yeah. We broke it down to two things. Crisis Core Reunion and Elden Ring, obviously. And we'll just continue right with it. We gave it to Elden Ring. We praise a lot of Crisis Core Reunion. I think a lot of it in our minds, once we started to re-experience it, we realized how much more action-based it is. And how much more almost Kingdom Hearts related it is, and the limited RPG elements that are in it because of what it was. It's not a fault, it's just it is what it is. But when you think Elden Ring, when you think about all the micromanaging of not your party, but of your equipment, of your weapons, of your summons, of your items, down to the leveling system, when you see a level of this system, when you want your strength, dexterity, and intelligence, this, and it all affects something. It all affects what weapons you can carry, what magic spells you can use, it all just breaks it down, and I don't know how much more role playing it gets in there. That's down to almost pen and paper role playing. You can't do this because you don't have this. You can go unlock this all amazing. I have this amazing powerful sword, but because one of my stats isn't there, I can't do anything with it.
Yeah.
It just sits there, and I just don't know how much more RPG does it get than that. Yeah, take it away.
Yeah, I think there are 2 other games that could perfectly fit in this category, but because you and I didn't really play it, they're kind of like notable omissions. I did want to give a shout out to like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Triangle Strategy. I didn't really dive into either of those, so I didn't want to speak to them, but I didn't want to leave them out completely, so I just want to throw those names out there. I know there might be some people who listen, they're like, how are you going to have RPG category and show no love to those sides? Totally valid. But in terms of the 2 that I played this year, Crisis Core and Elden Ring. And when it came to this category, you broke it down perfectly. I'm thinking role-playing game. Which ones fulfilled that task? And, when you talk in Elden Ring, choosing a role to play, a mage, a tank, that and having that modularity in small stats, and you have to almost change your strategies depending on what that boss is particularly vulnerable to. Crisis Core, it's actually, it has RPG mechanics because it's a Final Fantasy game, but it is a lot closer to the action adventure games in terms of that kind of moment-to-moment gameplay style. But because, it does have all the traditional stats and different attack vulnerabilities for certain enemies, you certainly got to put it in the RPG category, but nothing for me personally touched Elden Ring this year, even if it does have a lot of things that are maybe informed more by like Western RPGs. And I think when people think RPGs, they think either tabletop or JRPGs that are like the thing, but I think Western RPGs have certainly kind of influenced kind of the way people approach games, and kind of in some ways redefine the genre that allows for things like an Elden Ring to kind of take the kind of mantle for best RPG for me personally. So it was relatively easy this category to determine it for me. It was the year of Elden Ring. I think with small exception, God of War really was right there to compete with it, but it's tough to really beat Elden Ring this year. I mean, I think the entire first half of this year was dominated by Elden Ring for me personally, and it was really hard for it to be. It was like slightly dethroned by Game of Thrones, but I mean not Game of Thrones, God of War, but not by a big gap, but pretty much almost by every other metric other than like its story. For me, Elden Ring dominated.
No, absolutely.
And the next category, that is all you, man.
Yeah, so we'll touch on it quickly. Best fighting game. So this year wasn't too much. There was some re-releases, there was the Persona fighting game that was re-released, but it really was just re-release imported. There was nothing else added to it. Everybody talks about JoJo's Battle All-Star R, whatever, which is
weird
just an
title.
Enhancement. It's an enhancement. It's almost just a straight anime fighting game than it is. But there was 2 big ones that really released: King of Fighters 15 at the beginning of the year, and Multiverses. So we gave it to, and I think most people agree, we gave it to Multiverses. The Multiverses is definitely the fighting game of the year. When you have a game that encapsulated on the fact that it's been in a little while since they're the height of Smash Bros. Ultimate, no more DLC, no more this, and the biggest part people love of that stuff is seeing their favorite characters come back. So when you see a team who actually believes in this idea, start to sort of roll out and show that they are taking it serious. Now, I wish they went the more premium route in the sense that I wish the game released for $60 with a nice big cast, an arcade mode. They're going the opposite route, and they're doing a free-to-play model, which, a bunch of microtransactions, costumes, characters. You have some free play weekends. Arcade mode, I don't even remember if it ended up being added, and if it was very lackluster arcade mode. Super based with an online thing. It's the almost sense of Fortnite in fighting, in that brawler style. Where King of Fighters is just such a more hardcore, and has always been that hardcore fighting game. That 2D fighting game. It looks great, it's beautiful, but it does have the issues where it does play pretty old school, though as great as it looks, you can't just spin a stick and hit some buttons to get some cool stuff down. Multiverse is just in all ways, shape, and form. You can get the newcomers, get the old comers, get the nostalgia. They'll, they always wheel out my homeboy Iron Giant out of his retirement home, so we can slap him around. So that's why, for sure, hands down, Multiverses got it this year.
Totally. And then to cap the show off, I always think it's a really fun discussion. Most anticipated game. There are lots of games on the horizon, some farther off than others. And so we wanted to kind of lock in on what our most anticipated game is. But I do want to read a couple of nominations that I think are really interesting. So we have Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. I think, it's one of the most anticipated sequels that are coming out. Breath of the Wild, considered by many to be one of the best modern games of all time. And so it has big shoes to fill. It's actually, for me, in a very similar position to Ragnarok was right beforehand, where, it's got a lot of eyes on it and we're not totally sure if it could stick the landing. However, the team has shown an ability to deliver something at a very high level. So I have a lot of anticipation for that. We have Dragon Age Dreadwolf. It would be the 4th game in the franchise. The franchise has been inactive for quite a while. BioWare has been in a little bit of a tricky position. BioWare actually has 2 games on this list. But they're in a tricky position where they're coming off the back of Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem. And so it's been kind of a rough road for them, but Dragon Age, as of right now, has generally delivered what people have wanted. For people who like the franchise, I think they've been generally pleased by all the entries previously, and I think Dreadwolf, from a lore perspective, is in a very exciting place that is exciting a lot of people who are big fans of the series. And they've been very drip-feedy in terms of new material related to Dragon Age, so I know there's a lot of hype there. Mass Effect 4, I think, is going to be what a lot of people are hoping to be the franchise saver. Mass Effect obviously went into an interesting direction with Andromeda that people were not happy with. They used a weird B team. It did not deliver on what everybody was hoping it did. And Mass Effect 4, by all intents and purposes, seems to be a return to form. It has what looks like to be the old cast, at least portion of them. And it looks like it's going to be continuing the story that you got with Shepard initially. We don't know much beyond that, but that is an incredibly exciting thing. It's confirmed. It's coming. We don't know the timeline on it. But with the collection coming out, bringing the original 3 to modern consoles, I think it's in a position where, the excitement for this is higher than it's ever been. Spider-Man 2 by Insomniac. Somehow they're pumping this out a lot sooner than everybody else thought they were going to. And it looks like, they're going to be bringing Miles into the main thing with Spider-Man on this one. And somehow Venom 2. This game is probably going to be incredible. The first one was, I thought Miles Morales, the kind of spin-off game, was also amazing and a great kind of first step into this generation of gaming. And so, I'm super confident that this game is absolutely going to knock it out of the park. And then Final Fantasy 16. The first mainline Final Fantasy game in quite a while. 15 was years ago. And so they really take their time between these main entries. And, every trailer that they've released has sold me on this game even more. It looks beautiful. It's a return to fantasy elements. It's been a long time since, again, mind you, Final Fantasy VII Remake has always had that kind of steampunk vibe to it. 15 was a lot more modern. It has some kind of like medieval knight vibes when you talked about like the capital city and stuff like that, but generally that was a very modern game. So was 13. So it's been a long time since they've really dabbled with the fantasy elements of Final Fantasy, and it seems like 16 is kind of a return to those things and has a lot of plot elements that kind of connect it to a lot of the older games. So Steve, what was the one that we chose for our most anticipated game? This was a tough one.
Yeah, this was a tough one because, again, there's some solid ones. There's some ones we haven't even discussed, which just land in a different zone. I mean, you're talking Resident Evil 4 Remake. You have all this other stuff. Next year's going to be wild.
Yeah, for sure.
And you have some great solid ones. Like, I can't wait for Spider-Man 2. I'm excited to see what goes on with Dragon Age and Mass Effect.
Forspoken, right, Steve? Forspoken.
Yeah, Forspoken.
Yeah, I know you're excited. Stop playing.
But yeah, hands down, I think it was easily. I can't believe you had. I think you had forgotten it on the list. I'm glad I checked it a couple of hours ago that you forgot this on the list. Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah,
I think is my most high. It's just there's something that comes with not only a Final Fantasy game, but when it's a numerical Final Fantasy game. 15, you have to remember 15 was just in development hell. Remember 15 was a spin-off
13 versus or something like that. Yeah,
it was versus 13. So that was going to culminate in a final game that him and Lightning were going to cross over. That all got re-scrapped. The game was canceled. The game was reworked. That's why you have that big empty open world. You have some linear sections. That's why. So when you have a Final Fantasy from the ground up that was created with this in mind, a fresh team on there. So it's not Tetsuya Nomura with his crew that usually pumps these out. They're doing probably Kingdom Hearts 4. That's fine. Let them go butcher that over there.
How dare you?
Love him. Huge fan. I just think he needed a break from this. He needs a break from that as well. But let me have this for now. But yeah, when you have this return to this fantasy storyline, and then you have the writers and team that is behind the revision of Final Fantasy 14, which is from all the story expansions and stuff like that.
They fixed it, yeah.
And they fixed the game, which is incredible. Now, this is a completely different game. Though the jumping in point to Final Fantasy 14 is like nearly impossible now, the story that is there when you can get to it, or if you just watch these cutscenes online and read some of this stuff, is fantastic. So the fact that they were able to do that with now some real cutscenes, some real voice acting, it's going to be incredible to see. I just can't wait to see just this, what Final Fantasy should be at this point. You went kind of cyberpunky, you went super futuristic with 13. 15 is in a weird place where they have phones, but they got to use gas. It's super weird in that world. So it's great to be back to the sort of sword and shield style of Final Fantasy. That's just a big reminiscence of like Final Fantasy 9, which I'm a huge fan of, and it's my favorite Final Fantasy.
Yeah, me too, and I'm so glad that you mentioned it, because I had completely forgot about it. I just double checked. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be out in June, so it's not even super far off. And so it's a really good time for Final Fantasy fans in general. I mean, obviously we're playing Crisis Core right now. That's going to probably take a little bit of time to beat, and then we'll be right there with 16, and then 7. The 7 Remake 2 or whatever that ends up being called, I believe, is also next year. So it's a great time for Final Fantasy people, and I have never gone into a Final Fantasy game so confident, which could be a bad thing, but is also kind of a good feeling for me. We had a long stretch of time where I was just not into Final Fantasy games personally, and it's not because I thought they were bad. They were just not for me. I loved 9. I grew up playing a lot of 9, a lot of 7, a lot of 4. And 10 came out, and I was like, meh. And that was kind of when I moved more into the Kingdom Hearts thing. I was not into the whole Xanark and Tita thing. It's just not my thing, or Titus, or whatever you pronounce it. 12 was very MMO-y for me. Wasn't into it. 13, I know you like 13. I don't like 13. I've actually replayed it in adulthood, and I do appreciate like the paradigm shift. I appreciate all that stuff, but I don't really like it that much.
Fair.
Yeah. It's just the system's not for me. It's kind of like 8 in that way, where it's like I just don't like the system, so it's hard for me to get into the game. And then 15, the boy band pushing the car through the fighting scorpions in the desert. We're getting married, let's go to the honeymoon thing, just never resonated with me. So it's been a long time since I've seen like a mainline numbered, and I don't count 7 Remake because again that's a no-brainer. It's been a long time since I've seen like a mainline numbered Final Fantasy game that I see a trailer for and I'm like, yes, we are good. Like I'm seeing the gameplay and I'm like, yeah, that's what I've been looking for. And yeah, it's basically been since 9 for me. Not counting any like remakes or anything like that. Since I've seen like a new Final Fantasy game that I know is going to absolutely kill it for me. So this is exciting for me, and I totally expect this game to come out and for it to be awesome, and then eventually them do Final Fantasy 17 and me not like it, because that's just how it be sometimes. that's the nature of just innovation. But yeah, we got some exciting times coming. And so that's the Neo Vintage Game Awards, everybody. And I'm excited to do this, for next year and years to come. I think we are going to have some stiff competition for Game of the Years next year. It's going to be a good, be a stacked lineup. But overall, 2022, I think a very good year in gaming. We did a little bit of a year recap on the last episode, but this kind of makes it even more evident, naming out all these games, that it's been a solid year. And I think that it's always a good position to have competition, to have these moments where you you come up with an idea of like what you think should be nominated, and I come up with another idea, and there's a genuine discussion to be had there. I think that's such a good thing because in other years it's like you would name something, I would probably name the same thing, and we're kind of just like, well, I guess that's going to be it. You know what I mean? Because some years have been a lot drier, but this year was a really, really solid one, and I'm glad to have seen some solid contributions from Nintendo, some solid contributions certainly from Sony. The third parties did their things, the indie did their thing. God bless Microsoft. I hope they do something next year. But yes, really solid year in gaming.
No, yeah, it was. It reflects that, though there were some stumbles, though there was some worry. I think at the end of the day, when you have just two juggernauts in Elden Ring, God of War Ragnarok just clashing, and you have to which one's even better is a good sign. It's not like it was just a hands down runaway.
Exactly. Well, that's been the show. Hope you guys tune in for our next episode. That's going to be a God of War spoiler cast where we're going to go into our overall thoughts on the game, and then full spoilers deep into not only what we thought of the story, what we thought about the characters and some of the progression, but also where we think the franchise is going to go. So for any God of War fans, definitely check out that next episode. We are going to go deep, and I know you and I have tons of thoughts about everything related to God of War and where it's going. So I hope you guys definitely check out that episode. Until next time, this has been the Neo Vintage Podcast. I'm Jabril, and I'm here with
Steve. Hope you guys enjoyed.
Bye.